Today we're talking about part 2 of sewing the FibreMood Lumen dress and stitch fails and fixes. How did I fix the issues that I ran into? If you're new to my channel, my name is Cynthia. Thank you for joining me today, and I want to thank all my new subscribers and viewers. Thank you for your lovely comments, your thumbs up, and the encouragement you've given me. And if you're here from another channel, thank you, Diann, for the shout out. I do appreciate it. Before we talk about the problems and the fixes, I want to insert a clip from where I left off in the last video. And if you haven't seen that video, you can go back and check last week's video where I talk about wanting to sew a dress, how I came to choose this dress, and the beginning of the sewing journey. Now we're at part 2, and this little clip is going to show some sewing, and then we're going to see where I realize I have a problem. I should have checked in just a little bit ago before I attached these neckline facings to the center back seam. So I have attached those, and those are interfaced. And for all my facing pieces, I interfaced one solid piece of fabric before cutting them out. And I used some lightweight interfacing that was a gift from Lynn. Thank you again, Lynn, for that lovely gift. It has come in very helpful, and this project used up the last bit of scraps I had of that. But so it's a lightweight interfacing, and then after I sewed those on between the markings, then I understitched this so the seam is attached. You pull out, I don't know if you can see the little tail pieces, you pull that out and you pin from just from the marking down to a certain mark on the bottom. I'm getting ready to stitch the center back seam together, and then I'll press that open, and you leave the opening at the bottom where the split is. I did notice that in the image here, it doesn't show the overlock edge going all the way to the bottom. And when I was doing all my overlocking, I did overlock all to the bottom, but I don't really think it's going to matter. And I prefer, with it being such a delicate fabric, for it to be overlocked anyway. I'm going to stitch this seam now, and then I'll press it open, and then I'll come back to you. The next step is to sew the tail of the facing, and then press that open also. It is also saying at this point, then you're going to overlock the rest of the facing piece, so the edge that you didn't interface earlier, all the way around to the other side to give that a clean edge, and then give it a good press. So I want to do that step next. Here's the diagram. This is the diagram of what instructions it's given to do next. Just thought I'd show that in case it didn't make sense when I said it. But I think that will, give it a really neat edge and make it look a lot better. I've got that overlocked and pressed. And now we're ready to move on to sewing those shoulder seams together. And those are done at a 5/8 inch seam allowance. So the rest of it was in 3/8 or 1 centimeter. And it looks like the neckline is going to be done by just doing a double fold and top stitching. So that shouldn't be any issue. I have a dilemma. I sewed my shoulder seams, and I thought, well, I'll do a quick try on. My head will not fit through this opening. Got a big head, that's what I'm telling you. So I have a couple of scenarios of how to fix it, or actually 3 possible solutions. I could trim the neckline down, but I think I need to try to keep the front as is. So I'm thinking I need to create either another longer facing piece and make this opening longer, or put in a zipper. That means I'm going to have to do some unpicking. And I really didn't want to have to do that, but needs must. It's going to have to be done. And I've just got to decide whether I'm going to put in a zipper or create a longer facing, because this seam has got to open up just a little bit more. So wish me luck. I really had hoped that this dress would work without having to do a lot of adjustments. I really need to get this sewn and completed by next Saturday. I have 2 weddings to go to, and this is the dress that I'm going to wear to those weddings. Let's talk about how I fixed the neckline and what I still need to fix. First off, I removed the facing that I had put on the neckline, and I also lowered and made the keyhole opening longer, and I added neck ties. Let me show you the ties. I really love the ties, but I still had an issue when I first sewed on the ties. It still makes the neckline feel snug around the neck. Now the model, the neckline does come up high on her also, so it is designed to be that way, but it is a snug fit. So if you don't like anything too tight around your neck, you may not like this dress. Or you may want to do like I did and make that opening longer. So I opted not to do a longer facing. I opted not to do a zipper. If I'd done the zipper, it would have been really snug, but with the tie, I can kind of loosen it up and make it a little bit more wearable to where I don't feel like I'm choking. However, I still had to make an adjustment, and partly because of the arm side, and partly because I just wasn't happy with where the bust darts here at the center was laying, and I needed to shorten the shoulders. So I removed the neckline, but I salvaged my little neckties. I also shortened the seam here, and I reduced it from a 5/8 seam allowance. I went all the way up to a 1.5 inch, but then I didn't like where that seam, this seam here, set after I stitched it. So I don't know if I need to do what they call a forward shoulder adjustment. I think that may be what it's called. But I ended up unpicking. I did a lot of stitching and unpicking on this garment, mainly up here around the neckline and the shoulder seams. So I end up reducing the front seam by, I believe, an inch and an inch and a half on the back, and then restitching it. So, and I restitched it at the 5/8 seam allowance. I'm still not 100% sure if it's laying exactly where it should be, but my shoulders do slope forward a little bit, so it's better than what it was, and I'm happy with it. But I do believe that, and if I make this dress again, which I really do want to, because I'm really loving the whole look. Once I tweak it, I'll really love it. But I believe that I need to take out or reduce it here to make this shorter, and that would also help with the arm side issue that I'm having, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. But when I raise these shoulder seams and I reduce this neck a little bit, I did get the bust darts where they should be. Let me lower the camera so I can show you that. If you'll recall in the last video, the bust darts point towards the center. So here's my bust dart, and it is laying exactly where it should be on my body. Now before I made this adjustment up here, this arm side was so indecent, so low that I wouldn't be able to show it here. So let me raise my camera back up a little bit. It would have been very indecent. So yes, by reducing here in a future make, I would eliminate part of that depth. Now the dress is designed to be lower here. I watched the FibreMood Lumen video. It's just a little 5 or 6 minute video. And when she's doing her little modeling, it does show it being really low there. However, the model is not as well endowed as I am. And that may be why it looks better on her than it would on me, because I don't want my bra hanging out. So that is the issue I'm still working on. And I do have a solution, but I would love your input to let me know if you think my solution is the right solution or if I need to do something different. You'll see it is showing some of my bra on both sides. And yeah, I really love the sleeveless look and the A-line shape of this dress, but I do want be a little bit more modest than this. I do want to be a little bit more modest, so I've come up with a solution that I think that will work. And that is adding in an additional bust dart and angle it down towards the other bust dart in my bust and reduce that right here. It reduces it by about 1 inch, maybe slightly over 1 inch. That is my solution. Is I'm going to put in a bust dart, and the pattern instructions does tell you to use bias binding on your armhole. Now I did contemplate making like a cuff, or making it more like a cuff so that it has width, but I don't want to really take away from the design element of the dress. So I think if I put in the bust dart and then using my bias binding, that it should eliminate that. It should help with it being too large and give me the coverage that I need. It may still not be as modest as I would prefer, and if it's still indecent or like not modest enough, I do have another additional step I could do. However, I would prefer not to add a modesty panel. I'm not sure if that's what they're called, but it's where you make a little U-shaped piece of fabric, double layered, so you're sewing it together and then turn it in or right side out, giving it a good press, and then you hand stitch it inside your armhole so that you have a little bit of a panel there. And I will do that if it still needs additional coverage. But hopefully just by adding the bust dart and then doing my bias binding, it will fix the issue. I want to take the dress off now and we'll talk about the rest of the make. I did finish all the other steps, so I'll share some of that with you. I apologize if this section of the videos, the sound is not as good. My microphone died, and so I need to charge it. But I'm almost finished, so hopefully you'll stick with me until the end. But I completed the rest of the dress except for that arm side. And so I was going to share a little bit about the hem facing and the split. You'll recall earlier in the video that I mentioned that I had overlocked that split, and I'm actually glad that I did that because it made it easier for me to turn it and fold, because it's kind of like a very narrow hem and that you end up top stitching. But you first sew on your hem facing, which is a really wide hem facing, It's 2 pattern pieces, so you have the main center piece and then the 2 outer pieces that you're stitching together. They're all interfaced. So you're attaching your hem band, you're folding it over and you're stitching it down, and you're also stitching around the bottom, and then you go ahead and clip your corner and you turn it so you have a really nice corner. I'm not sure how well you're seeing that. And then I also top stitched the seam to the facing before I gave it a good press and turned it to the inside. And then you're also folding over this seam another time and giving it a good top stitch, so it's a very narrow hem. And you're also stitching the hem facing down at the top. Now their instructions was mentioned using an overlocking stitch or overcasting stitch, and I did do some sample pieces on my machine, and I didn't like the way it looked on the fabric. I didn't want it to have a lot of like straight lines and zigzag lines on the top here. But I did use the Overcasting Foot, and I'll try to insert a picture here so you'll see what it looks like. But it did make a difference in how the material fed through the machine. So it has like this white plastic piece that fits, your fabric fits under, and you can kind of line it up by using that as a guide. And then I stitched it from the wrong side with a straight stitch, but at a longer length. And I really took my time with it because I didn't want to have any puckers. But the purpose of that overcasting foot is it guides the fabric more evenly under that presser foot, or under the presser foot and through the machine. And it did a great job, and I had no issues with attaching that hem band. So overall, I'm really happy with the dress. I do need to implement the changes, putting in those bust starts and putting in my bias binding. So the final reveal will be next Sunday. It'll be after the wedding, so hopefully I'll get some photos even at the wedding. But I am going to also share some footage of me trying on the dress with a couple of different pairs of shoes and a couple of different necklaces, just to see which look I like best. And so that reveal video will be next Sunday. I hope you've enjoyed seeing this one today and seeing the stitching fails and fixes, but I believe it's working out in the end. I'm going to close today's video by sharing some footage from some stormy weather we've had this week. We've had 2 or 3 bad storms over the past few days, and one night we lost power even. We had a really bad lightning storm. It was like being at a fireworks show, and unfortunately I didn't film most of it because I didn't think of it in time, but I did capture a little bit of footage of that. And then one of the storms we had was such a heavy rain. I was shocked at how heavy the rain was, and so I just filmed a little bit of that too. And so I'm going to close the video with that. Again, I thank you for watching and for supporting my channel, and I hope that you will continue to help me increase my watch hours. That is my goal, is to reach over 4,000 watch hours by February. I appreciate all your help and for being here for me.